For a king to acknowledge that these people, his subjects, weren't his subjects but were God's, says a lot about Solomon's attitude. He recognized that these were God's people, and God had put him in charge of God's people. He didn't put him in charge of his people. It was God's agenda, not his. So God responds to his request. God said to Solomon, "Since this is your heart's desire, and you have not asked for wealth, for riches, or for honor, or even the death of your enemies, in fact, nothing for yourself, since you have not asked for long life, but for wisdom and knowledge to govern my people, over whom I have made you king. Therefore, wisdom and knowledge will be given to you." Here's the results of a leap of faith. "And I will also give you wealth, riches, and honor, such as no king has ever had before you, and no king after you will ever have." Solomon put God first. God gave him what he asked, and a whole lot more. But you see, that's only one very small story in the Bible of people taking a leap of faith, putting God's directions ahead of their own, putting God's priorities ahead of their own. Let's talk about Moses for a minute. He's in Egypt. God sent him back there. They've gone through all the plagues. Finally, Pharaoh's stubborn heart relents a little. Of course, it took having his son killed to get that far. And he let the children of Israel go. And they left Egypt, and they were out 2 or 3 days' journey. And they were heading out away from Egypt, towards Canaan, a little bit. And looking on the map, it looks to me as though they were kind of heading out towards the edge of this thing called the Red Sea, although it's kind of broken up in pieces at that point. They're heading out towards the edge, and they could have gone around it. But God clearly tells Moses and commands him, turn around and go back towards the edge of the sea and camp by the edge of the sea. But here's the kicker. God tells Moses this: I'm going to harden Pharaoh's heart yet again, and he's going to come after you. Now, if you or I were Moses, or definitely me for sure, I'd be thinking, okay, God, well, you've definitely proven that Pharaoh's a really tough-headed guy, and he doesn't want to let us go for any reason, and if you say he's coming after me, I'm believing it. So, I got one question. Why are you sending us to box us in front of an ocean? We have no place to go then. Why are you doing this? This doesn't make sense. But you see, Moses was putting God's directions first. He wasn't Stephen Berg. He directed the children of Israel, and he did exactly what God told him to do. And they ended up camping right on the edge of the sea. And of course, God's word came true. Pharaoh got over his grief, got mad and ticked off that all his slaves had left. He musters up the entire Egyptian army and starts marching after them in a feverish pace. And at some point, the Israelites start hearing this rumbling in the distance. They start seeing this cloud of dust coming up. And they're wondering what's going on. And finally, someone from the back starts screaming, "No, no! It's the Egyptians! They're coming after us!" Now the whole camp of Israel is in an uproar. And they're scared. And of course, they start turning on Moses. And what's wrong with you? Why did you take us out in the desert? Was it because none of us died in Egypt? You want to take us out here and get us all killed? What's wrong with you? And Moses does what Moses does best. Talk to God. But even God chided him a little. Why are you crying to me? Don't you trust me? Paraphrasing a little bit. Raise your staff over the sea, and it will part. And you'll walk through on dry ground. Well, you see, there was a pillar of cloud. And this cloud was a cloud during the day, and at night it would turn into a pillar of fire. And it had been leading the children of Israel all this time, so it was in the front. It was up next to the sea. But as the Egyptians came, this pillar started to leave. I'm sure some of the Israelites were panicking. What? God let us out here? And now when we need him most, he's leaving? But God had a plan. And he moved around behind the Israelites. and created a barrier between the Egyptians and the Israelites. By this time, night had fallen, and a huge wind came through. On the side of the Israelites, there was a burning pillar of fire providing all kinds of light. On the side, the same pillar emitted a dark, dense black cloud on the other side, and the Egyptians couldn't see a thing. So for all night long, we have the Egyptian army sitting like a cougar ready to attack, pounce on these Israelites. They're basically defenseless. They'd been slaves. They had no training as warriors. They had women and children, cattle and sheep and donkeys with them. They weren't ready for a fight. And the Egyptian army was all suited up, ready to take down every one of them. But they couldn't move. It's pitch black. The wind blew and blew and blew. And pretty soon the water started forming these strange walls. And the ground started drying up. And Moses said, "Go!" And the Israelites started running through the Red Sea. And they go through on dry ground. But morning comes. And now the Egyptians can see. And they're not giving up without a fight. Pharaoh stands up and says, "Well, go after them! Go and get them!" And they start charging down through the Red Sea. But then things start happening. Their wheels start breaking on their chariots. Their horses start falling down. And all of a sudden these generals are going, "Oh boy, we're in serious trouble." All those plagues, they started remembering that. And they're going, God, the God of the Israelites is working for them. We got to get out of here. I don't care what Pharaoh says. And just about the time they start turning around, those walls of water crash. And Pharaoh's entire army was drowned. But what a leap of faith. God told him, "Go camp over by the sea. And by the way, you're going to get set up." Moses did it anyway. At that moment, when they're trapped between the sea and the Egyptian army, every human wisdom, every instinct in us would be screaming out, "We're going to die. You've abandoned us. All hope is gone. There's nothing left but swords and spears and blood." But you see, God knew all along what he was going to do. It just required a leap of faith on the part of Moses and the Israelites. But that's just one small story. I mean, it's a huge miracle, probably the most prominent, amazing miracle in biblical stories.